Hi and welcome back. I love to have you back here. Today I have a very special guest with me. It's Bong from the Big Bong channel, and I'm really honored to talk to him. I've been a fan of his for a while, and I'll let him introduce himself. Hi, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm very good, and you? Thank you for having me.
Thank you for having me as well. We also did an interview for his channel, so please check that out.
Yeah.
For my viewers that perhaps haven't come across your channel by any chance or don't know you that well, how would you introduce yourself?
So my name is Bong from the channel Big Bong, which is focusing on promoting language learning, obviously, and cultures in general. I would say that my main approach is to show how I personally enjoy learning them with movies, TV shows, and songs. But maybe I should probably... just a little disclaimer, not to be mistaken for a hyperpolyglot like yourself. I primarily see myself as a performer, as an entertainer. So that's my main purpose online, to amuse the audience, but also to engage them and motivate them. Now, if I can teach them at least one little thing, that's great. But I'm here to entertain mostly.
I love that. I think, it's very important that message that you're sharing, because at least what I get from your channel is how fun language learning can be, and that for me is a big deal, and I love that there's more people out there like you that are sharing that. And so what languages have you studied, and then what was your reasoning to learn each of those languages?
Okay, so the first language I've ever spoken is Japanese. I used to speak it with my mother and my siblings. But I was born and raised in France, and so I learned French in school. And all the other languages were during travels, when I was traveling. I went to the UK a couple of times from middle school. Then I went to German-speaking countries, including Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, and Spain as well, which are all very close to France, so that's the good thing about living in Europe. And then later on, I had the privilege to be chosen as an exchange student to study in Seoul, the capital of South Korea. So I think it was a necessity. I needed to communicate with people and just, find a connection with them. And I had no choice but to learn the language. So obviously English helped me do that. So it was the first language I actually became fluent in. And the other ones, I think I maintained a very intermediate level in all the other languages, but I'm still working on them, and it's exciting.
Yeah, no, it's a journey for sure. To keep working on the languages. Yeah, it's always a thing to do. I'm interested, like, what are you learning right now in terms of languages? Like, what are you focused on?
So that's the thing. I'm not very serious in my learning, because as you, I'm very I don't want to say I'm busy. That's an easy excuse, but I have a full-time job and I have my YouTube channel, so it's very difficult to dedicate a significant amount of time in learning languages. But I'm trying to consume content in mainly Spanish and Korean at the moment.
Okay, so that's interesting. Can you give me a bit of a tip? Because you mentioned you have a full-time job. So, like, what is it, and how do you combine that with all of your passions?
It's funny because my full-time job is actually pretty similar to what I do on YouTube. I'm a content creator for the university, so I make videos for online courses. And so, of course, it's a lot of editing, and sometimes it's very difficult to deal with that. But I'm trying to, I think... the most efficient way to learn languages is bit by bit. It doesn't have to be a lot of time, but I'm trying to dedicate maybe 15 minutes per day to learn new expressions, for example. So if during the day I say something and I'm thinking about, how do I say that in Spanish or Korean? Do I know it? Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. If I don't, then I try to find a way to say it. And it's something I learned, and I would write it down and then sometimes review it. Right. Otherwise, I have language learning apps that I use on a regular basis. So I try to be there at least 30 minutes to 15 minutes for Spanish and 15 minutes for Korean every day.
I see. And so what I really would love to learn from you is, because I see from your channel that you're really big on music. And I wholeheartedly believe in using music to learn a language. So what tips would you give in terms of learning language with music? or like practicing languages with music, how can people apply that to their own learning? So even if they're not like talented, or they can't, they can't do what you do, they can't really play music or anything like that, but just simply enjoy it. So what would you say?
I love that question because people don't really think about music when they start learning a new language. But let me start with a quote from an artist from Zimbabwe. He said, "If you can walk, you can dance, and if you can talk, you can sing." And I also enjoy dancing, but that's another topic for another day. Now, singing is something they can practice. And the truth is, you don't need to sing for others. You can just sing for yourself, and I believe it makes you happier. Now, something that I've noticed from people who want to speak a language fluently, and I emphasize on the word speaking, because when you look at them, they're not really talkative in their native tongue, and that's a problem. It's not a bad thing, maybe they're just shy or introverted, and that's fine. But unfortunately, if you want to speak, then you need to have words coming out of your mouth. You need to engage muscles inside and outside of your mouth. And so singing can help you do that because, you listen to a song and you sing along, and then that's that. Also, another thing, a very mnemonic way of learning is rhymes. Most of the time, actually rapping, maybe you might not consider that singing, but then there's a lot of rhymes, there's a lot of words, so I think it's a very efficient way to learn as well. And singing, also most of them have rhymes. So just learning the lyrics by themselves and then adding the melody. The melody is also another mnemonic in itself. I think it's really powerful for the learning process. Now, it's not directly related to singing per se, but another problem that's a bit more serious is when people don't like their voice and they avoid speaking because of that, So without taking singing classes, there are exercises to find your optimal voice, knowing how to properly breathe when you speak, and also understanding the depth of your vocal cords. So that'll be more radio training. But then once you know that, once you feel better speaking, more comfortable with your voice and everything, also your how articulate you speak and how eloquently you speak, and you can start doing that with your native tongue, then I think it would help you learn languages in general.
Absolutely, and that's such a good point, because I actually I really didn't like hearing my own voice back then, because it's really weird, because what you hear when you speak and then what you hear on tape are two very different things. And so whenever I would hear a recording of myself, I was like, do I really sound like this? That's awful. But then I think YouTube helped me so much, having all of those recordings of myself, I got really used to my voice. So I think it's a lot of times about getting used to your own voice. I don't know if you'd agree, but maybe...
Yeah, but...
Yeah.
So sorry, go on.
It's just maybe sometimes it's useful to record yourself and just get used to your own voice. If you
Absolutely.
Never have.
No, that's the thing. And then sometimes you'll hear something, you repeat, and you think you repeat them well, because when you study a language, there's also the accent, how you pronounce things. And you're convinced, oh yeah, I repeated it like it's perfectly repeated. But then you listen to yourself after the recording and you realize, oh my God, no, not at all. So what can I correct? So I think it's good to record your voice. And the truth is, I took these lessons, singing lessons. I taught myself how to speak with a radio voice, and so I feel comfortable when I speak. But I still don't like listening to my voice. It's challenging to edit my videos. But then, I got used to it. I don't particularly like listening to myself, but then I have to, and I think it helped me in learning languages and feeling more comfortable with speaking in general.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And so I also wanted to ask something else that I kind of just link with your channel, because I haven't seen anybody else in the language learning community online that speaks about this, and it is the concept of alter egos. Because I think that when it comes to your videos with Julian and Taka, and I hope I'm pronouncing those right, by the way, the names. But so they remind me of this, and I don't know if you'd consider them that, but personally, I'm a huge fan of the alter ego concept, and I've mentioned it before, and Todd Herman's book, I've also talked about that, and I just love it. So Would you consider that like alter ego? Do you think that it helps let go of inhibitions, speak better, etc.?
So I might be biased, but as I mentioned, I see myself as a performer more than an actual polyglot. So role playing has always been a passion of mine. So as mentioned, also I take, I used to take acting classes back in the days, and indeed, there are many things that can be applied on language learning. So first of all, the confidence of public speaking, maybe having an alter ego that's more confident could help you become more confident in your daily life or in public speaking. Like you can incorporate that in your own personality. I said also working on your voice. Now, without necessarily creating a full new character, there are cultural things you'll need to adapt anyway, right? If you simply want to communicate. So in some countries, they speak louder than others. So you'll have to adapt your volume. Otherwise, they might keep asking you to repeat, right? So also the body language also is different. Some signs can have meanings that have a completely different or opposite meanings in your native tongue. Do people hug? Do people give kisses when they greet each other? Or do they just wave like that? So coming from, being born in France and going back and forth to Japan, it's completely different. So whether you like it or not, bit by bit, without even realizing it, you'll have created an alter ego. You'll behave differently. So the question is, do you do that voluntarily? Is it purposely creating an alter ego? You don't have to, but it's going to end that way. So if you want to take a step forward, maybe it's more, it's going to help you in the process. It's like, smiling to be happier or being happy and smiling. I think if you create that character and also exaggerating the pronunciation, like you want to sound like a British person, exaggerate it first. People might be, might felt a bit cringy at the beginning, but then the more you'll do it, the more you get used to it and you'll speak faster and with more fluidity. And I think it's going to help you on the long run.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Something that I've noticed, I think it was recently on TikTok, perhaps. I saw this video of you and you were doing different Spanish accents. And I was really impressed by how you sounded like somebody from Spain and then you sound like somebody from Mexico. And it's just, it was an incredible thing to watch. And so I want to ask you about that because, a lot of the times it's not crucial that we have the perfect accent, but a lot of times a lot of us want to get the accent right. So when it comes to accents or simply learning to pronounce things correctly, like what would you say? What are your tips as somebody that's, I think you're fantastic at that. So I really would want to hear about that.
Well, thank you so much. First of all, I don't think I'm perfect in either accents, but it's, it's part of the learning. And again, I exaggerated because maybe if I go back to Spain, I would want to speak a bit better the European way. If I go to Latin American countries, and also, they have so many countries down there. So, also find something that's maybe understandable by everybody, but staying neutral or standard. Yeah, I've always been fascinated by accents because it's funny that you speak the same language, but in such a different ways that it can create miscommunication, and also sometimes words that have a meaning. So for example, in Spanish, coger, it's a very, very useful and a word that you would use in so many different contexts. But then you go in Mexico, for example, and the main meaning is very...
Yeah.
I'm not going to say it, but very explicit, right?
Yep.
So I'm just fascinated by that, and it's also the beauty of these very big languages that are spoken in so many places in the world. Now, I wouldn't call it a secret, and we mentioned that in our interview for my channel, but adults and very young children have different brains and learning processes. And unlike what people think, the adult brain is more mature and therefore has more power to learn. So why do children... why are they so fast at picking up accents? Well, there are also disadvantages of having a more developed brain, I think. And first of all, there is the fear of starting something new and realizing all the mistakes you'll be making, especially related to the language itself, not necessarily the accent. Children don't really care about mistakes. They don't even know what it is. And the other one would be reading. Reading is one of the best and most efficient tools to study anything. That's why after a couple of thousands of years, we still use it to store information. Of course, we don't carve rocks anymore. We store that in servers, but the main principle remained the same. Now, the danger with reading, especially if you want to speak a language fluently, is to rely on reading too much. So let's say I'm French and I want to learn English or Spanish. If I read a text, chances are I'll read them in the way I know how to. So in French, chances are I'll read them the way I know how to. Or in Spanish, if I'm French, seguramente lo leeré como sé. So my tip would be to readapt your brain and imagine you're a baby once again. Like, you don't have to pretend like, but you can pretend you don't know how to read, and you can just listen and repeat. And it's going to be very difficult at first, for sure. But I think it's the best way. Don't even try to think about the letters. Just repeat. Oh, how does it sound like? And of course, it's going to take time again. But then I think it's the only way. And then once you're really comfortable with the way people speak, or the way of pronouncing things, then after that you can adapt it to the way we write, but not the other way around. So that would be my tip. Listen and repeat before trying to write and read.
Yeah. I think it's important. It's always important to have that input, that auditory input. Otherwise, you can't really reproduce sounds well. But also, as you said, I think we can take a page out of like children's book basically and start a little bit more to let go of inhibitions. And so that's certainly a wonderful message to share. And so something else I wanted to ask you, a bit different than what we've talked about so far, but since I believe my audience is very interested in like learning about different languages and how to pick them up, and I can't really offer any insights into Japanese because I've never studied the language. But you, for you it is a native language. So I would love to know like what your tips are for anybody out there that wants to learn Japanese.
Well, it's not going to be it might not be helpful, but be patient. You'll have to be patient. Unless you speak Chinese fluently already, or Korean, you're going to have to adapt if you only know Romance languages or languages with Latin alphabet, because it's completely different. And it's a very tricky language to learn because you have different ways of reading the same thing. And related to the previous question, it's a bit tricky because I said don't rely on the Latin alphabet, and it's an easy way because you can learn. You can completely learn with what we call Romaji, which is like Romance language or Latin alphabet to memorize. But I suggest you learn their way of writing as soon as possible, because unlike other alphabet where each symbol is associated with a sound, Chinese characters, we call kanji in Japanese, have a meaning in itself, and so it literally takes you to another linguistic dimension, and so it's worth taking the time at the beginning. If you just want to say a few expressions here and there, no problem. Listen and repeat. The pronunciation is actually not that hard, and then you can transpose that to the Romaji. But if you really wanted to take it to the next level, then you'll have to learn the alphabet, and especially the Chinese characters. And it's very challenging because we're talking about thousands of characters, but yeah, you'll have to, that's my suggestion at least.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. I'm actually, and it feels great to hear you say that, because I'm trying to start learning Persian. And right now, when you're, stressing the importance of like learning a different alphabet and like how, that's good to have in the beginning, I feel much better about my choice right now, struggling with the Arabic alphabet. So thank you for giving me that boost of a thumbs up. And also, I think it's it's important for me to also ask you about French, because you have the unique experience of somebody that's, grew up in France, but then now you live in Canada. So you have that deeper knowledge of both varieties without, that's not just about travel, but it's actually about you've spent years in both countries. So what would you say about what variety of French to go for? If somebody's interested in learning French, it's good to, especially as a beginner, you should focus on one, I would say, right? It's like maybe later you branch out, but, or do you actually disagree with that?
I neither agree nor disagree. It's just that, of course, it's better to consume content depending on where you're planning to live or travel. That being said, if you learn the standard European French that you see on TV, most of the French-speaking countries are used to that, so they'll understand you. The problem is, will you be able to understand them? So my suggestion would be to start learning that type of French, very, book French, standard French, and then later on go to the country and then learn the dialect from then on. Because, for example, Canadian French or the French we speak here in Quebec, it's mostly, contractions. So sometimes you even ask them, what does that mean? And they don't know because it's too contracted and they're just used to saying that. And that's also, that's what people think about when they say dialects. It's things you say, you don't necessarily know where it comes from. You don't necessarily know how you write them. But with standard French, everything is it's a very difficult language with a lot of exceptions. So French is not like all... how to say that, like straightforward, like you'll have to learn. It's already very difficult to learn French, but it's going to be more organized and structured than learning a dialect. So I would say go for standard French. You can't go wrong with that. And then if you go to an African country or a North American place where they speak French, learn from there, because they'll be at least able to understand you and also mimic you and adapt their accent to a more standard version that you'll be able to understand.
Thank you so much for your tips, for your advice. It was lovely to have you here. Can you share with my viewers where they can find you, where they can follow you on social media so that they can learn more about your experiences with languages?
Of course, absolutely. So I'm mostly on YouTube, Big Bong, and you can find me also on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook with bigbong.official. And I started recently Twitch. I want to connect more directly with my audience, so I'll be learning live on Twitch. I tried yesterday, the first time. I'll need to study that a little bit more, so maybe in January. I don't know when you're planning to release this video, but I'll definitely be on Twitch and explore that, and Twitter as well, Big Bong Official.
Great. It's perfect. Thank you. Thank you for being here. It was great to speak with you. And I hope that we can chat again, and I hope that this was useful for everybody. It was certainly fun for me, and I learned quite a bit of tips and tricks, so thanks for that.
Definitely. Thank you so much.